Hello again. Mustn't forget to look at the camera. Just a quick introduction to this next story, which is called Across the North of England in 1969, Causing Mayhem Along the Way. It's an amusing story about an episode in my life which you can find in It's a Rum Life Book 2. All these books and publications you can find links for on www.crackerbooks.fr. So without more ado, let's have a go, and I hope you enjoy the story.
It was not until later in 1969 that ECYB Transport began to operate alongside my time with Firestone. On the docks. After many weeks following up sales leads and writing to countless boat builders and importers, I had managed to land a contract for moving imported Magyar-class sailing cruisers from Hull docks. This new range of heavy plywood boats was being built in Hungary and imported through Hull. They were to be transported to the concessionaires, who had sales licences in various corners of the country. These locations were Glasgow, Windermere, Emsworth in Hampshire, and Brightlingsea in Essex. The day of this particular story, I was heading for Windermere. It was always a bitter battle getting the boats loaded at Hull. These were the good old days when dockers worked in gangs. One gang did a job, no matter how many were needed. They were allocated a task and the gang did it. You may recall this is what largely caused the demise of England's docks and dockers in general. I only needed a mobile crane and 2 men. There were about 8 or 10 in the gang, so the job took ages. Loading at Hull docks was the worst part of the job, normally. On the way. I liked the English countryside and always took the scenic route. Besides, in the 1960s there were not many motorways. The boats were substantial, well constructed in plywood, and weighed about 3 tons to 4 tons. They came fully equipped and sat in a huge wooden cradle. The masts and yards, that's the long bits that normally stand upright on a sailing boat to hang the sails on, were located along the flat base. Sails and other gear were inside the roomy cabin, and a smart wooden clinker-built double-ended rowing skiff sat on the cabin coach roof. There were 2 sizes, a Magyar 7 and a Magyar 9. I'd first noticed this particular mark a year or so before, when our local sailing club commodore bought a Magyar 7. It was a nice-looking boat, inexpensive, roomy, well designed with good quality workmanship inside and out, and they sailed well too. I was loaded with a Magyar 9 for the delivery to Windermere. The trailers we used had been designed by myself and built locally by Bev Scott of Walcott near Lincoln, who, like myself, was just starting a new venture. The trailer for the Magyars was a simple, flat, twin-axle structure to carry the boat in its cradle. At this time there were no real hard and fast rules about Land Rovers pulling trailers. The Land Rover was, and still is to a certain extent, a strange beast. Its vehicle category is light locomotive. Neither a car nor a lorry, sort of in between. This meant that the law had difficulty coping with Land Rovers and strange cargoes. Nevertheless, I had taken extra precautions when building our trailers and ensured they had hydraulic overrun brakes. Normally trailers and caravans of a certain size have a braking system operated when the towing vehicle brakes. A slide is actuated pulling cables on the trailer which puts its brakes on. Sort of. As we were going to pull fairly heavy loads, we needed reliable brakes and introduced a powerful hydraulic system instead of the simple cable on the trailer. By midday I was approaching Harrogate, the town of my birth, and in need of fuel. My trusty Series 2 petrol engine Land Rover was a thirsty beast, especially pulling 4 tons of boat and another ton of trailer, uphill and down dale. There is a total petroleum site in Harrogate. It is still there, on the Knaresborough Road between the hospital and the town. As one gets older and more mature, unexpected coincidences tend to flow like water from the proverbial duck. In 1969 I was about 25 and not so used to coincidence. I'd filled up the truck, glanced up at the lovely canopy above me, and judged that there was plenty of room for my exit. I'd arrived at the pumps without incident. Why should leaving be any different? As I paid for the fuel, I glanced into the office and straightway noticed sitting there was a previous client from my days working for Lincolnshire Standard newspapers. Bernard was small in stature and a very shrewd Jewish gentleman, always immaculately dressed. He had arrived in Boston in the very early 1960s to breathe new life into an old established garage business. He had been so successful, so much so that the owners wanted it all for themselves, and Bernard had to seek pastures new. And here he was. I put my head in at the office door and made myself known. A quick hello and goodbye, as he was obviously busy. I returned to my truck and moved out from the pumps towards the road. Suddenly, as they say, there was this huge crash. Glass was tumbling all around me. I got out in a state of shock and saw that the keel of the double-ended heavy-duty timber-built dinghy stowed on the roof of the boat had ploughed a route through the underside of the canopy. It had removed all the tube lights from just against the fuel pumps to where I eventually stopped, and left a clean groove in the smart plastic undersurface. Needless to mention, the owner and the visitor from his office were quickly on the scene. The dialogue is unrepeatable. But what I can mention is that the other man was the local total representative, and he fortunately had a camera with him. The main thing I remember next, and I honestly think this saved my bacon, was the rep saying he was always looking for good items to put in their National House magazine. I did walk over to the other side of the road with them to view the scene. It did look pretty spectacular. Can you imagine one of the larger modern multi-island filling stations with the huge one-piece canopy stretching from end to end? In the middle was a large boat pulled by a small Land Rover, and the boat looked to be well and truly jammed underneath. My excuse was that the surface on the route I took to get out was graded slightly up and reduced the headroom just in the wrong place for me. Bernard and the company rep took their photographs, and at least the rep looked pleased. They came over to me, and I was told in no uncertain terms to clear off and not come back. The words used were somewhat different and very, very colourful, the meaning unmistakable. 1 or 2 more light tubes went on my final bit of extraction, and on reaching the road I never looked back. I have revisited the town several times since, but never dared to use that same filling station again. I do hope you've enjoyed this story, brought to you by Cracker Books, written and read by Keith Sanders.
Just to conclude, it looks from your Facebook pages, Harrogate, that the site has changed hands, and it looks very much as if that is the same site with a co-op are the owners nowadays. Perhaps you can let me know in your comments if I'm right. So I hope you enjoy listening to the story, and don't forget to subscribe and like if you like what you see. Subscribing helps us with the YouTube people. It's quite easy and it doesn't cost anything. And then finally, if you want to look at other Cracker Books publications, you can find all the links on our website, which is www.crackerbooks.fr. Very easy to remember, isn't it? www.crackerbooks.fr. There's lots and lots of things to read and watch, hours of entertainment. So thank you for being with us today, and until the next time, goodbye.